Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today we're going to be reviewing the PDW-R. Now, the reason for doing this review is because not only do I find this gun very interesting both in real life and in the game, but it is one of the more popular PDWs available for the engineer class. Visually, it's a very futuristic looking gun with foregrips similar to the P90. Now, unfortunately, in real life, this gun never made it through the full design phase and was halted in production being designed by Magpul, but the gun itself was being designed as a much more compact version of essentially an M4, a gun that was going to have the same accuracy and fire capabilities of an M4, but much smaller, that you could take into vehicles such as tanks and jeeps. Now, this is pretty much one of the only PDWs in Battlefield 4 that shoots the same carbine rounds as most of the other carbines. It's shooting 5.56 rounds, and it's rewarded by having the exact same damage model. So we're doing 25 damage maximum, 15.4 minimum. So in many ways you should find similar performance in this weapon to a carbine out there. One of the only differences is that it is given significantly less aiming down sight accuracy, partially due to the short design of the weapon, but internally the barrel is actually very similar to that of an M4. And I'm not really sure why DICE decided to give bullpup weapons lesser aiming down sight accuracy in this game, as in real life it's not necessarily a characteristic of bullpup weapons. Now let's get into the SimThick stats here and sort of break the gun apart and figure out what its role is, because having carbine style ammunition is basically going up against every other carbine out there, and there's a lot of really good competitors like the AK-5C, so why would you potentially want to use this gun over something like the AK-5C? Well, the answer is hipfire. Now you'll notice that I am using a laser sight here. I transition between using and not using a laser sight for most of the gameplay here, and it has incredibly good hipfire accuracy, better than any other carbine in the game. So by default you have a 0.75 hipfire accuracy. If you look at its actual aiming down sight accuracy, it's 0.5. So literally the hipfire accuracy is not that much worse than the actual aiming down sight accuracy. Once you put a laser sight on here, your hipfire accuracy literally comes in line with your aiming down sight accuracy, and it becomes incredibly effective. So couple that with a very effective rate of fire of 750 rounds per minute, you can have a very potent weapon for close quarter combat and even medium range combat. You can try and hit fire people at medium range with that. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it all the time, but it's certainly not going to be bad, and in a pinch you can pull off some pretty interesting kills that you would probably not expect to get with any other gun. Now, if your playstyle does involve a lot of aiming down sights, and I have to admit it's very hard for me to break my habit of aiming down sights and trying to go for more hipfire kills, it's something that you have to consciously try and will out of your playstyle while you're using this weapon. But if you really do prefer aiming down sights, then there is very little reason to use the PDW-R over any other traditional carbine. And that really is the problem with carbines being a universal weapons class, is you always have them as an option. You know, you have the class specific guns and then you have carbines, and so many of the carbines are really good weapons. The AK-5C, one of my favorite guns in the game, extremely good no matter what class you put it on. And so when you have class specific weapons like the PDWs only for the engineer, it's very hard to try and argue a PDW without just mentioning the close quarter capabilities, because at medium and long range carbines are always going to outperform these. And one of my biggest gripes with Battlefield 4 is the lack of maps that really caters to close quarter combats. We had No Shar Canals on Battlefield 3, which was definitely one of the most popular maps being played. That was nothing but close quarters. You could run a gun like this and actually do really well. We even had an expansion in Battlefield 3 called Close Quarters, where all close quarter weapons really excelled, and you could play those maps, use shotguns, use PDWs, and they were very effective. Battlefield 4, we have maps like this here, but there's so many long range situations on gold mud railways. There just aren't a lot of TDM matches that are going to really favor close quarter weaponry over other weapons, and that's just one of the big problems with the weapon balance in Battlefield 4. Is it does make sense. The weapon balance mathematically is very good, but the maps just don't really cater to it. Now, if I did have to pick some of the best close quarter maps in the game, I would say Zavad 311 certainly has some very good close quarter areas if you stay underground or inside the main buildings. You can keep it very close, very personal. Again, it has some sniper areas if you get up on top of the big buildings, but as long as you play the map correctly, you can keep it close. As As you can see here on Goal Mud, I am engaging a lot of people at sort of medium range areas, but if I keep it in close to the buildings, play internally on the map, don't go to the outskirts, again, you're going to get a lot of close quarter combat. So each map sort of has an area that you can try and play close quarters. There just aren't any maps that are like almost universally really good for close quarter combat. Now I'm spending all this time talking about how the PDW-R is great for close quarters, but what if you are trying to use it at long range? What's going to hold you back? Well, first of all, your aiming down sight accuracy is 0.5, which is just atrocious. It's terrible. It's worse than any carbine, any assault rifle. You're going to be outgunned by most weapons out there. You can throw a heavy barrel into the PDW-R, which to me seems a little bit silly, but you can try and improve the accuracy of this and use it for longer range situations. It's not going to be horrible, but you're definitely not going to want to focus on that. Its meters per second in terms of bullet velocity is 460, and that's very slow. So trying to hit moving targets at long range is also not very good. If you put a suppressor on here, that's going to further reduce your long range capabilities. So there really isn't a lot going for this weapon for long range, and one of the things that I try and focus on and teach people to do is with guns, you want to play them to their strengths. So the PDW-R is great for close quarters, it's great for hipfire. Play it to its strengths. Don't try and put attachments on it that's going to make it good for long range. That being said, you'll see that I don't really have a laser sight on here for a lot of this. The hipfire on this is actually so good that you don't really need the laser sight for a lot of the extreme close quarter action. It just depends on if you want to be hipfiring at medium range. Now, if you want to try hipfiring at medium range, then the laser sight is absolutely going to be the way you want to go. My problem is that I feel that the laser sight gives away my position that much more, and so if I can get away without using it, then I won't. And so for the most part, I found the hipfire to be more than adequate without the laser sight on here. Now, having played just hours and hours and hours of team deathmatch and domination style game modes, there's a few things that I can recommend to you if depending on the type of weapon that you're using. Now, if you got something that's really good at medium and long range, a good full rounded assault rifle, it doesn't really matter the player population of the game that you're in, because you're going to be able to engage people at most distances and have a pretty good chance of winning, or at least being on equal footing with most firefights. Now, if you need to use a weapon that's mostly close quarter dependent, I recommend joining a server that doesn't have quite so many people in it, because when you get a lot of people, you get these really intense lanes of fire that are mostly medium and longer range combat, and that's going to be trickier for you to work in and get closer to people. So if you're having a really hard time using PDWs and stuff for close quarter combat, you just can't get in close enough, try joining a slightly less populated server, and I think you'll have a better time. So the PDW-R is an interesting weapon if you can try and hipfire it most of the time with a laser sight, and even use that hipfire for medium range targets. I think you're going to be surprised at just how effective it is. Try it out for yourself. Let me know what you think. I'd love to hear in the comments. And as always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.